In these next couple poems, I think I'm writing about being a parent, the wonder of it, the energy from it, but that anxiety about not being able to control everything, the anxiety of worrying about your kids. The beet. My daughter puts a beet from the garden in a glass baking dish. Canola oil, 425 degrees. She takes a shower. In the living room, I watch a show, a reboot of an old one, now with a heroine to slay the villains, as upstairs the water runs. A sweet smell, charcoal and Girl Scout camp, kindling thoughts of s'mores and sit-upons, tents shielding us from rain. My daughter, hair wrapped in a towel, returns to the kitchen. The beet as briquette nurses flames. Once we put out the fire, debride the carbon whole, the beet at its center is moist and meltingly tender. Chalk and release. On our laps, the children nestle with soft chalked feet and bright red streaks of water ice laced across their wrists and cheeks. They have worn the chalk to nubs, inscribing these stone steps with loops and lines and names that will stay until it rains. My daughter, age 3, once announced that reading hurt her brain and asked me to remove all the books from her bedroom. Put them to bed, feed them, bathe them, wonder where one has misplaced retainers or sneakers or teeth. Tell them, wipe your mouth, and please be more careful. Tie their laces into double knots that come undone too soon. And the last poem I'll read is sort of a summary of most of what these poems are about, this idea of time lapsing and then sort of turning in on itself and coming back, and the memories that come with that. Blink. 30 years is a blink, a quick stroll as shade rolls over our heads and clouds build up to block the heat of our days. We walked past homes and cars and carried groceries, hefted children, hired tutors, drafted indignations. We lost some things. We accumulated treasures. We forgot what we lost. We picked lint from our pockets, surprised to find blue kernels of sea glass. We sat on the beach and tried to keep the umbrellas wedged in the sand, got slammed and undertowed, panicking once, and the kids laughed before they realized this was serious. We hardly spoke. We stiff-lipped. We drank. We liked the smell of smoke. Every August, a constellation of friends descended to carry us on waves of IPAs and microbrews and the neighbor's basement wine. We liked the smell of snow before it fell and the ozone hint of storms in early spring. We could not distinguish certain sounds of birds and gave up identifying them on hikes. The trails we used to take became too slippery to risk. At night, there was a hush and desire to touch, but our fingers stopped just before our faces, a decanting, all of it sideways, then sidelined. We sat and watched ourselves, often thinking others must be wrong, often wondering why we couldn't get enough, why we were flattened or fattened by the sound of laughter. 30 years of fingertips poised inches from each other's, our faces wet with fog, salt breezes blown from farther down the shore. So thank you. That's from Leap 30. And I'm looking forward to conversations.
Stephen, would you like to respond a bit to Diane's reading?
Sure. Although I must confess that I'm not accustomed to instant commentary right after I hear somebody read. I usually have to let it resonate for a while and percolate through my psyche. But what I noticed is how Diane can make an entire landscape out of a domestic scene. So there's a lot of family and a lot of interiors in the poems. And the interiors, become kind of larger and larger as the details accumulate. That would be my initial impression. There were some great lines. When I have money, I'll have music that is mine. I like that very much. And our feet are sticky as we slow dance. That's a very vivid and evocative image. But I think the best response that I can make is probably with my own poems. That I didn't figure out ahead of time what I wanted to read, because I really like, if I'm not the first one reading, I like to hear what the person before me has read and said, and try to riff a little bit on that. So if you don't mind, that's where I'd like to pick it up.
That would be great. Should I say a few words about you, or do you want to just jump
right
in?
Sure. I'm always, it's better when you're not reading something off Wikipedia or off my website. So if you want to introduce me, I'm more than interested to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Well, I'll be very brief. So I met Stephen through our mutual friend and colleague, Jonah Raskin, who's a fine poet and professor emeritus up at Sonoma State. And Jonah introduced us as a consequence of Stephen's and my shared love of manual typewriters. And he thought that Stephen might enjoy a small volume of fictive verse that I'd written called Swizzlefelt's First Folio from the Typewriter Underground. And Stephen responded with a hand-typed, absolutely beautifully worded letter of response that I prize to today. And with that, a friendship was born. About Stephen as a poet, there are very few living poets that I genuinely look up to, and Stephen is one. His insight, honesty, understanding of language, capacity for insightful translation, humor, pathos, and nuanced word use are remarkable, as is his productivity. Last Call, released this past fall, is his 12th poetry collection. But more than these things, his work is so well made that his technique, except when he brings it forward consciously, as he does in his poems to his benefactors in Last Call, disappears from the page, leaving us with pure poems that live as they stand. Such poems come only from one who's given his life and heart and discipline to his craft. And it's a remarkable thing, very, very rare. So with that, folks, please welcome Stephen Kessler.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I'll start with some poems evoking my parents, since that's one of the things that Diane was doing. These first two poems are based on photographs taken by the same photographer. This is called Photo of My Mother, circa 1968. I found it in a drawer after her death, a business card size shot. Nina reclining in a white ensemble on the slope of a sand dune on Point Dume, curve of the Malibu coast and cliffs over her shoulder, hair flipping in the breeze, big smile on her face, for the photographer, her lover, though she was still married to my dad. It was the 60s, and she was in her 50s, and still good looking with her good looks and all the cosmetic help she could afford. And Jack had lost interest, and she still desired and needed the adoration. So Sully, with his camera, was her cameraman. And here she is in this picture, 50 years later in a little frame, on a shelf with her father's pocket watch, which has no hands, looking happy and sort of sexy and politely wild, leaning like that with her sleeve pressed into the patchy land, and her bare feet in the sand, the old print bleached out, faded with age, with time, an image disappearing into a haze of forgiving and obliterating light. And here's another poem based on a photograph taken by the same photographer, probably right around the same time when he went to the racetrack with my father. So this is called Fat Jack at the Track. In his box at the wire, in his blue plaid sport jacket, big eyeglasses shining, big cigar in his hand, an open program unfolded on the rail alongside binoculars. My father is grinning in his favorite habitat, touts coming by with tips and gossip from beyond the backstretch. Characters, he called them, storytellers and first-class horse-shitters with colorful histories in the streets and hangouts where the big boys yacked and placed their bets. The picture was shot by the ex-vaudevillian who'd taken his place in my mother's bed by the time he sent it to me, in a frame no less, a memento of their day at Hollywood Park. Maybe Bukowski was in the stands that afternoon, maybe on the way back to their cars, Jack's Cadillac in valet parking, Book's VW Bug out on the lot. They took a few parallel strides, crossed paths before returning to their respective worlds and understandings of chance. The long shot bet, unpredictable payoff, last $2 lost. Between the ringing of the starting gate and the thunderous rumble of the photo finish, happiness flashes, and between races, they celebrate their luck, relishing the brief relief. So my current domesticity is at a historic building in Santa Cruz, which is also now a senior housing condo. And it's a little community, and many of us volunteer to do little sort of household maintenance tasks. So my task, my monthly task, which I did yesterday, was sweeping the courtyard. And this poem I wrote years ago, when I first started this volunteer project, sweeping the courtyard. Pulling a stiff push broom over the cracked concrete, sweeping the scattered leaves of yesterday's blustery gusts, listening to the scratchy rhythm, breathing the stray dust, unsettled by my good housekeeping. I'm starting the new year like a monk, like a young monk, assigned by the master to the lowest enlightenment imaginable. And I like it, this unskilled task, the subtlety of its simplicity, taking the space in sections, dropping the debris in the plastic buckets to be dumped in the yard waste recycling carts, a few scraps of foil and flakes of old white paint mixed in with the organic matter, teaching me patience and the pleasures of imperfection. A meditation more meaningful than sitting still because it accomplishes what I didn't know I wanted to do, clearing the fresh space for doing nothing. And one of the kinds of poems that is in this book, and especially in the final section, is actually immediate domestic landscapes rather than picked out of memory. Just try to pay attention to what is in my immediate surroundings. So here's a poem called Dark Dahlias. Dahlias, the thick, dark color of Cabernet, bought on impulse at the farmer's market the other day, are starting to wither in the Italian pitcher, scored at a yard sale years ago in Wallala. The succulents in pots on the terrace need some attention. Transplants to bigger pots, soil amendments, more room to bloom. I will go on spraying the aphids as needed. I will cook my soups and compose salads and whip up smoothies in these purgatorial days of existential suspense. No telling what's next in the epic serial of one day after another, dealing new twists in the dealt hands of hopeless gamblers, playing our last chips with no lucky lady. She has struck out on her own adventure, moved by young male muses. Those handsome dudes have everything, and they're giving her what she needs. Not an ace up your sleeve, nor switchblade in your sock will get you out of this mess. The whole casino is a house of cards in a hurricane, your hand blown every wrong way with horrors around every corner and no secret annex nor righteous benefactor to protect you. And even if your private luck holds out, the world around is beyond repair. That's why these gloomy flowers will have to do, brightening the day with their wine dark light. So there are a lot of love poems in this book as well, most of them retrospective love poems. And this is one, this is a poem that actually goes on for quite a long riff in one continuous sentence. It's called Long Twilight. It was written, I write often in public places. I find concerts to be a very fertile source of material for poetry, as are cafes and park benches and various other places where I am inspired by the immediate sensations. So this poem was written at my favorite jazz club, Columba Jazz here in Santa Cruz, called Long Twilight. For now, the skylight illuminates, and I will write until the sky darkens, and the light on the page fades in the falling shadows of a May night, as the pianist plays what songs remain, which they do because they are made to outlast the skilled hands driving the instrument. All those notes lost, even as they resound in the mind, and stay there as if echoing always, like some face seen up close in dim light once and remembered, like the embrace sustained by adoration and gratitude, by devastation and the loss of everything but that, the sweet melody triggering what is missed. Bésame mucho. So many kisses they combine to taste eloquent in one mouth watering with fruit music, that which drips more delicious with each bite, sweetness slightly acidic, which only accents its bitter intimacy, what nobody learned in sex ed because it was crossed too darkly with heartache, with infinite grief and what if, what might have been if only time hadn't intervened and life taken those turns that led to such long solitudes and opportunities to wonder what you might have done to understand and respond in time, changing the way things went in that flash of happiness under the sign of the snake, which appears only when planets align above lives, lucky to be in one place at a time, exactly right. Some city, let's say, where serendipity struck and took them both so far from what they thought, they never found their way to figure it out, could not find their way back, and found themselves estranged from their own souls. They were so confused by what had moved them together that way before breaking them apart and scattering them like perfectly played notes in some distant night, where one long stroke or twist of blue light as it cools revives what never was lost after all, because there it is in a long twilight with traces of Spain, dashes of easy summers, mists of skin whose sweat smelled sweet enough to lick, and laughter ensued under a spell of magnolia shade and citrus glow, a squeezing and savoring of every sip as the sun slowly rolled into the ocean and a hint of night made itself felt in the musician's fingers and in the stars unfolding their sneaky myths and legendary tales that never end, never exactly resolve, but go on, again and again. So maybe one more poem, and then we can move on to the next aspect of this informal event. Let me see if what I have here. Well, this is actually the prologue to the book, but it's a good finale too. Well, after the plague, the sight of you alive with no screen between is something worth trying not to die for. But who are we now? And would we know each other after this long exile? Protected by these antiseptic hazmat suits, these hand sanitized plastic gloves, these plexiglass shields, these protocols of the tested and the disinfected. For a while, we were mostly human, but that was in another century. Since then, we have sacrificed to survive the reign of terror of the microbes and the clueless rulers. Deprived of funerals, we grieve from an unsafe distance, where what we've lost feels farther away than even the absence of your presence. You I saw for the last time, one time long ago, when our next embrace, our next meal, was guaranteed by our existence, by our appetite for intimate understanding. Now it's not so clear. I'm not so sure. So much has occurred. Even remembering is beyond reason. So those are poems from Last Call, published by Black Widow Press. And thank you very much for your attention.
That was wonderful.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Diane, you want to?
Yeah, I would love to. What's interesting is I decided not to read a couple of my poems that are about photographs. I didn't see a picture of my maternal grandfather till I was about 50 years old. He was a black sheep of the family. My mother never spoke of him. My grandmother, who lived to be 103, didn't talk about him until she turned 100. And then she sent me a photo of three people. And I was really thinking, Stephen, as you were reading your first poem, this sense of the word, the written word, delving into the mystery of what we're seeing. You know, this idea that the person taking the picture of your mother is her lover, and everything human that goes around that, right? And all of these narratives and stories, and that we're extracting, or we're decanting, or we're synthesizing, or boiling down, or we've got stills someplace where we're making, I don't know, moonshine poetry of these photos, right? We're getting the essence of it. And something that I loved in all the poems that you read tonight is this distillation of character, um, and that you bring a very easy, accessible um, rhythm and language in each of these poems, but the people within them are so full-bodied and complex and fairly simple language. And I really love that about your work. And
What you said about your grandfather is amazing because I have a grandfather very much the same, it occupies very much the same space in my family. It was my paternal grandfather. I have a poem about him in a previous book because the first photograph I saw of him was when I was in my 60s, and it was a mugshot from San Quentin when he was being busted for moonshine in 1932, toward the end of Prohibition. So that's just an amazing parallel in our personal family histories.
that is, and it would be even stranger if they were the same person, but we'll. So anyway, so thank you.
And thank you. So
Anything
Mark,
else you'd like to? Oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to ask you if you were going to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Well, thank you, Stephen. That was just a gorgeous reading. And just to add a note, that riff you read from the poem you wrote at the Kiwamba was just extraordinary. I absolutely loved that.
Thanks.
So time for me to do a little reading. My name's Marc Zegans. I'm a working poet. I've published a bunch of collections over the years, and also done a lot of work where my poetry has been turned into immersive theater and film. And it's a real pleasure to read for you today. I've divided the work that I'll be doing into 3 parts. I'll start with 4 previously published poems, all set in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. The first 2 in North County at Mount Greylock, which was the first land reservation for public use in the United States. The second 2 are in South County on the Appalachian Trail overlooking Sheffield Plain, and in the woods at Camp High Rock, which borders the Appalachian Trail. I should note that the final poem in this sequence, Walk, was published in a beautiful handcrafted limited edition by Crane Maiden Press, whose publisher, Deb Catanzaro, who also goes by the nom de plume Peg Simone, is with us tonight. The second part of my reading is a string of short poems from Lion Street, a yet to be published chapbook about coming of age in San Francisco during the period between 1978 and 85. In part 3, I'll read a poem that's the final piece of a connected trilogy called Red Dress Cycle, in which the protagonist is playing blues after hours in a seedy hotel bar the night before an icy winter funeral. I should mention also that just this afternoon, I received the galleys for an anthology called COVID Isolation and Hope, Artists Respond to COVID, that's edited by Rafael Alvarado, Consuela Flores, and Richard Modiano. And it's going to be published at the end of this month by Finishing Line Press. So should time and interest permit, I may read the piece I contributed to that as a coda. Let me note 2 other things before I begin. One is to thank Lark Simmons, who did the flyer for tonight's event, and also last night, since this being my first time hosting a Zoom reading, spent a lot of time going over it with me and helping me get the mechanics down. And she also gave me wonderful feedback on my reading, and what I'm reading today changed significantly as a result of our conversation. So Lark, thank you very, very much. And with that, I'll turn to the poems. I should note that this is a unified reading, so I'm not going to read titles of poems or comment between them. Coming up Notch Road in February, past 1950s suburban houses, past the hill shredded with construction, past the steep, coarse pine needle watershed in late afternoon, snowshoes and parka. It's 17 below with a wind chill. And as the sales agent from Williamstown and I shuffle into Boney's old lands, the sky is effaced by towering bark, and the snow, ice crusted on the surface, breathes in the cold and shows itself dark. I'm falling into a bank now 5 feet deep, dropping backward into powder, adrift in a puff of snow for less than a breath, before I arrive at something solid, head below my feet, knowing I can't stand. The sky is effaced by towering bark, and the snow ice crusted on the surface breathes in the cold and shows itself dark. I'm falling into a bank now 4 feet deep, dropping backward into powder, adrift in a puff of snow for less than a breath before I arrive at something solid. Head below my feet, knowing I can't stand. As the snow closes in, frosting my face, I feel slow. Time has developed texture. It rubs my cheeks and works into the down. Is this time or cold? There's no difference now. Reborn on the hour, each hour, a ritual of spring equinox performed in a shuttered mountain lodge, shingled, hunch-shouldered, topping Thoreau's undulating country of clouds, embraced in Melville's gaze from Arrowhead, dark-bitten, bewitched, unforgiven, haunted by unpardoning old coot, a premonition of hawthorns, perhaps, or then again, simply nature's shakes of trees on immovable granite, catching monadnock winds blown 80 miles to the dense-massed pile above Greylock Glen. Yawps and howls this purple-eyed trickster delivers into the migrant sky, gape-mouthed, back-throated, shifting shapes of clouds, rendering them as spirit animals with each bawling burst. This scrawny scree-loper announces the forgiveness of all sins, dying and renewing at the clock chime in 24 convulsive cycles. This Western-born hyacinth coyote sits between chaotic convulsions at the dining table of the old lodge, her pale blue Olivetti MP1 resting steady on the new lacquered wood, the dim glow of a tortoiseshell desk lamp lighting its keys in the final hour of the poised day that divides sun from moon. For a moment on the ledge beyond the pine, I looked down on Sheffield Plain and Toad Bear Rock, gray, flecked, prismatic wheels spinning off its jigs and jags, warm on my soles and solid. I liked the hard edge of forest preserved for now as hedgerow to hiker's trail, falling hard from Eagle's Perch on Raceback Ridge to this gentle plateau, and detested the cut pines I found one year to mark for fools the Point de Vista, as if opening to light required a context crudely framed by the forester's axe. In those days, Berkshire valleys saw no haze. Inversion layers were for Angelinos, and closer by, people stuck between New Haven's east and west rocks, sleeping giant, snoring purple out back. I saw now the yellowing air of that congested harbor town and lost firm contact with the transparent beauty of this my place, then returned, awakened by a gnat, and in my thin-boned frame understood that I would come back here always in light and in dreams, and finally in death, my ashes to be scattered over this settled plain from high on this ledge, the one safe spot of my youth. He'd never been in forest thicker than stars when we turned off the gray moonlit clay road into the cool black of trembling leaves, a congress of tiny whisperers, voices fluttering down from the canopy, foreshadowing the physical descent in the days following frost. "It's so loud," he said, reaching for my hand. "It's so loud and dark and quiet and loud, and I can feel the rocks through my sneakers. I can't see anything, but I can feel." "What can you feel?" "The rocks in the air." "What does the air feel like?" "Cool on my arm, on my face. It feels like a soft blanket." And under my feet, I can feel the rocks. Some of them are very big, and others will make me trip if I run over them. I think we need to walk very slowly. I think you were right. And we need to feel. What do we need to feel? The space around our hands and our fingers and our bodies, so that we don't go crashing into trees or go falling down a cliff in the dark. It is very, very dark, you know, Dad. How dark? I have not seen this much dark. I cannot see you. I cannot see my hand. I do not think I can see the forest. Maybe we are part of the forest. Is the noise in this place the sound of God? Do you think God lives here in the forest? I think maybe we are hearing him breathe. Let's walk slowly and be very quiet. Just so you'll know, I am not scared. I think not seeing is not a problem. I like not seeing as we start to walk. I can smell the lake. It's right down below. I can smell great big rocks. We're near a cliff. If we move up the hill, we will not fall. Look, right there. You can see very dark trees, Dad. Do you think we are finding a clearing? I think we might be. Let's see if we are. Look, we can see the stars now in the forest. He stood giant eyes counting countless stars, his blonde hair washed white in the moonlight, slowly turning circles until he yawned, placed his hand once again in mine as we entered forest thicker than stars, walking now with the knowing of place that arrives only once in a boy's life. At Major Pond's traveling Chautauqua in California in Divisadero, we met for drinks. Our faces changed in the 2 years gone, yours sinuous, calculating, and mine like a balloon skin with a pin pressed against it. I'm up for a fling, you said. A fling? Yes, a fling. I could see it penciled in your leather calendar. Fling with Mark. I watched back 20 years tonight, sitting on a suede bar stool at Solstice, drinking soda water in the place once Major Pond's traveling Chautauqua, full of funky Victorian couches and pitted floorboards, where double whiskeys threw down my throat, poured sloppy and delivered free by the waitress who called my name, me too blind to see. I watched back 20 years as I stared past the too fine and too slick decor, the ethereal quasi-musicians playing their astral grind, back to when the Majors was a blues joint with a whorehouse upright piano, and same said waitress used to let me tonk up the place on weeknights when the band was off. I watched back 20 years as I looked at the well-dressed folks sitting in the candlelit booths by the window, where once Rasselas jazz hopped and bopped, and before that, just the dusty sounds of creaky night music at the Majors. I watched back 20 years drinking soda water, thinking, how do I gentle this old body that I rode so hard? Can I freshen that up? Said the chunky young man behind the over-polished bar. Huh? Can I put some soda water on top of that ice and lime you've got there? No, thanks. I washed back 20 years, chewing ice, missing the rough, scuffed bar, its pits and dents, the scuffed and broken tables, random thrift store chairs, torn red couch velvet, and my sweet black-topped waitress who emptied the owner's pockets into my glass, standing me to round after round on those, for her, empty nights. I watched back 20 years, slid from my stool, swept round the joint the long way as I made for its still bowed door, and smiled, knowing that we had changed places, Solstice and I. She was clean and bright and slick and new, and I'd become the trusty, old, rough and scuffed place of my youth, carrying with me now what once I needed place to establish. At Steep Ravine, I took you into surf, your fear breaking faster than the hard waves, spit and sparkle, lips, teeth, lids, and brown hair, bouncing as you jumped in the shore breaks, waves rising, dancing round your thighs, foaming. I took your hand in the hollow between two curls and led you to deeper waters. You look back to shore, scanning for your boy, a thin line of love tethering you to shore. You would not go beyond the second break. The line, a kite string too long, would be cut if you ducked with me into the black swell. Your arm extended, holding me, fingers unclasping slowly, at last releasing, as I turned my young back to your kind face, diving into the cold, quiet beneath. Her husband had walked out 3 weeks before. She wore a denim jacket and stone pants when I helped her carry bags up the stairs into her kitchen with the round table, where she poured from a bottle of Shiraz, linking her lips, offering me a glass, her hand trembling a bit at the fingers, long and precise, the hands of a dancer, which she had been on stage in Australia before she was cut from the corps de ballet and thrown from the rocks into the ocean that carried her north to California. And children with a man who made money by making clicks on a screen and shouting into a phone when some traitor fucked him just before the closing bell in New York. 3 days later, her hair smelled of salt when she invited me to a movie after thinking about me on her walk just now along Baker's Beach. Come get me, she said, turning light, young now, as she crossed the lobby, looking back once over her denim jacket and stone pants. I guess I went in summer to the concrete pier to cast my line with the homeless anglers, to watch it arc then drop into the troubled bay. I guess I went to lean against the rusting rail, to troll for stripers coursing black below the swells. I guess I went to feel the fog wet my face, to watch for yellow bridge lights above lonesome horns. I guess I went in summer to breathe deep, cold air, to sit watching my rod. I guess I went for hope. And when it bent, the moonlight anglers' faces rose, the fish in plastic buckets thrashed, and I hauled back, watching its hooped end bounce and dive before I reeled. I ran the line, reeled again, playing tug until I drew him out, black-eyed, blunt-nosed, his gray skin rough in my hands as I cut and threw him to the salt. The clavicles massive, under sunken skin, moist, mottled loose, depressing into space, unmuscled. The forehead wide and discolored, reflects sorry gray light from the unfaced window. Buena vista, if only you'd look. Thoracic spine crustacean curled, each vertebra distinct, popping back, exiting your body. Organs dropping, a pooling mass splayed across immobile legs. When I touch your back, all I feel is bone and sadness. When I touch your stubbled cheek, I feel more, falling skin, not quite clammy, large watered eyes rolling in their sockets, sucking breath, warm air on the release. You know I have come to say goodbye. We both know that you will wait to die until I have returned to my place, not my home, and that you will die alone in this place, not your home. Funny that you and I both misplaced, and we know it as I take you in, you and your view. You have steadfastly declined near 7 years, making no concession to the place where you will end. And so I rub your shoulders and feel the wool of your worn sweater pill in my hands, your voice distant and alert as I draw your pain into my fingers, bounces through my empty ribs. It rises with questions, falls with answers, and flows with half-remembered stories until the sun drops and the room fills with storm gray. You lift your head as I say goodbye, kissing you once on the cheek and once on the forehead, rubbing back your limp white hair. I go clumsy to the door, smelling of dust, of unclean commercial carpet, and turn in the crack, seeing bone and sadness merging into night, then a tooth and a smile, a softening around the lips, and that is all. Dead Man's Point is now closed to hikers. I went back past the barrier, up the old dust hill, finding happily at top the low sprawled knotty tree, hard knuckled against the winds that have swept men from the cliffs. Air flows below the roots, soil dug out, eroded, dust in an empty hand. It's so far gone, this place, the thin spine to the point brought low, no longer an enticement to walk out and test your luck with the gods. This one strong place crumbles at my foot. If I wander further out, I am more likely to take its life than it mine. I will not make this once bold place give way. And this is the final poem. Her father was a rock star. She was raised in arenas, growing up in the backstage until they discovered that she had a West Texas voice like a drill bit spinning in oil, soft as a baby's bottom with grit enough to cut deep into the hidden places where we store our souls when young, praying that they will be freed by one who sings into us, bearing our truth on each note, opening a channel to life, the tenor of this true tongue, breaking the shells that bind us fast to the stories we tell, its vehicle carrying us into the world eternal. Her voice, the revelator, came on like Willie Johnson was the angel Gabriel, announcing a feminine prophet who would sing our souls, and they wanted to use it, to launch it like a capsule from her father's great rocket, turning her gift into cash. And so she ran away far, marrying a drinking man, working concessions at fairs, never visiting her dad. And when the hours grew long, traveling out with her friend in a raise the devil dress to broken-hearted places where fractured souls come to sing. She hoped to find something there, not a thing that she could word. She wasn't much for language, but a something to say, yes, now you can bring your voice forth. You can sing here and be free. No one will violate you, turning your voice to their ends. You can sing here unbroken. And in the deep blues I played night before the burying, I forgot the big-legged girl with the maraschino lips, blonde hair, raised the devil dress, blue eyes you could swim into, whose quiet voice had traced mine until I felt the fabric over her breast brush my face, and her arms draped my shoulders, and her warm breath in my ear as she whispered, I could pull the men in this room right now, every single one in here, but you pulled me across that floor, didn't even know I came. While you played that gut bucket, you're still unwinding now. Can you feel me behind you? Can you feel my heart beating? Can you see my face and play? My daddy was a rock star. I could have been one too. I walked away from that life, put my voice away inside, kept it quiet for so long. Now tonight, I will sing for you. Thank you, folks. So that concludes the formal portion of our reading tonight. If folks want to comment and question, I'm all ears and welcome you all to unmute now and chat.
Mark, do your poems never have titles, or did you just cut the titles for tonight's event?
I cut the titles for tonight's event just to give a flow between them and to work it as sort of an extended sonic experience.
Worked
I thought it worked really well.
Worked very well, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I have the books and some of them. I have some of your books, but it was nice hearing.
Thank you, Carla. I really appreciate that. Are there?
I want to just thank you for the beauty of your poetry, and your reading was just lovely. The way you voice your words makes them more understandable and more immediately emotionally compelling to me. I found myself crying on more than one occasion while you read tonight, and I just really appreciate that. It was quite lovely.
Thank you so much, Fred. I'm truly, truly touched.
Yeah, Mark, can you hear me? It's Steve.
Oh, hey, Steve, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good. You're on your dad's phone line. It said Nicholas Koffler. It was really funny.
Oh, it's probably my son. Don't ask me how that happened. But
Okay,
anyway, yeah. Anyway, yeah, actually, I had questions for each reader. I won't monopolize. I'll maybe ask my first and then go back into queue. But for Diane, how you doing? First of all, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep. Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. So about the last poem, I was trying to decipher a little bit the what I might call the point of view, or the feeling about it from the inside. It sounded like the kind of thing where you're talking about a vacation spot, an annual summer vacation spot, that kind of thing. But it had the feeling of like, from the outside, it looks really great and fun, but maybe from the inside, it feels a little different. Am I reading it right? And I think the clue there was the reference to alcohol, and also that line about fingertips nearly touching but inches apart, if you know what I'm referring to. Could you comment on what the point of view or the attitude is of the person experiencing it, if you will?
Sure, thanks. It's a really great question. The poem is Blink, and I think overall it's a poem about loss. And so, but I also think I'm the kind of writer, I hate to put anything, like shove people's faces or emotions into anything. I'm a very distancy kind of writer. Like I'll give you clues, but I'll say to a reader sort of, I don't know, I guess I never say it, but I'm thinking it. I don't want to tell you what to think about it. You might react one way, I might react another. But I would say that for me, it was about trying to summarize my relationship with my husband, my ex-husband, and our time together, and how it was both lovely and not lovely. And it was, the complexity of being with someone is hard, hard to get into a, 300-word poem or whatever it was. But that sense of maybe everybody does this, trying to appear as if everything's okay, and yet on the interior everything is not okay. And
that's exactly what came across. And
yeah.
I didn't want to get too personal, but I had the sense you were referencing that, like, it looks like a lot of fun on the outside, but there's something going on the inside, kind of thing. So
yeah,
it came across exactly that way. So good, fine job of sort of giving us a clue and getting us to understand.
Thanks.
Hey, Mark, Franco here.
Hi, Franco.
Hey, just wanted to express my gratitude again. Thank you very much for the link. As I mentioned, I'm visiting relatives in sort of a sad situation down here in Mexico. I've been out of the loop, disconnected for social media for the last couple of weeks because I was just dealing with what's going on here. But I was able to link from here and join the meeting. Thank you, Stephen and Diane. Great reading. I really enjoy your poems. I hope I can hear from you some more at some other time when I'm back in California and get more involved with some other group readings. But I just want to say thank you to everybody. Hope you all are doing well. Stay safe. Thank you.
Great to see you, Franco. Thanks for tuning in from Mexico. And when you're back up here, let's find a way to read together. That would be lovely.
Yeah, of course. We will.
Kay Bradner had suggested, Diane, that you read, if you're willing, one of the poems that reference a photo. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, sure. I wish I had the picture that I could grab handily and show it to you. It's from about 1932, black and white, matted, grainy, and it's a young couple crouched in the snow in front of a roadster with a little boy between them. So this is my grandfather. This is the mystery man. It's a great photo. It's wonderful. Let's see if I can find it here. It's a poem in 3 sections, Memento Mori. Memento Mori. 1. She will live to 103. She will teach me how to hunt mushrooms and quote Marcus Aurelius. She has written a poem that I will discover long after her death in a box of genealogy books. The poem is about me. She will someday say to me, when you know, you know. 2. His last memory will be of snow clinging to mittens, as Lewy body dementia tirelessly removes the other seasons from his 78 years. He will lose 3 of the fingers on his right hand before the age of 5. He will learn to use his left. He will be arrested in the Las Vegas airport for carrying a loaded gun onto a plane and be angry because this embarrasses him in front of his grandson. 3. He will collapse at 53, succumbing to a congenital heart condition that will kill his youngest son in another 18 years. This is the first photo I have seen of him. He is a handsome man, which I know has allowed him to get away with things.
That's one of my favorite poems of yours, Diane. I remember very, very well reading it for the first time. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else anyone would like to say or ask before we wrap things up?
I just wanted to say, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
I'm in Santa Barbara and have known Stephen for many years, and I was delighted to tune in to hear all 3 poets. And I just wanted to thank you for organizing this, and I hope to participate or to listen to other readings that you do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary.
I want to second that. This was really delightful, Mark.
Thanks, Carla. Well, I'm hoping not too often, but every few months I'll pull together something like this and do it again.
I just wanted to add my voice, Mark. Thank you so much. This is Anita, your old colleague from University High School when I taught and you were a student, a young boy.
Yes, long ago.
This was exhilarating. I'm just so excited to get copies of Diane's and Stephen's and your poetry, because each of you read your poetry so well, resonated with so many of my own life experiences. And I just want to thank you again. I'm adding my thanks for this wonderful afternoon and the masterful way you read all of your poems and formed all those fantastic pictures. Thank you.
It's a real blessing, Anita, to have someone who goes back so far to be to be here at the reading. It's a really wonderful thing. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I have to break in for a moment and say I am also a graduate of University High School, but I have no idea whether it's the same one that you two are referring to.
San Francisco?
Los Angeles.
Oh, yes, yeah, sure. There's some connection there.
Marilyn Monroe went to the University High School in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Preceded
Well.
me.
And that's it. Maraschino lips.
So shall we say goodbye? I want to thank Stephen and Diane for absolutely beautiful readings and for being willing to be the canaries in the coal mine for this first trial reading that I've hosted. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Mark.
organizing.
Thanks for
Thank
inviting
you.
us.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
Stephen. Thanks, everybody.
Good
Thank
to
you.
meet you, Diane.
Bye.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.